Let's get you a view from corporate India, from industry as well. Niranjan Hiranandani joins us on the phone line. Mr. Hiranandani, thanks for joining us right here on ET Now. How do you read this move by the government? Does it seem like a clamp down? They're not saying it in so many words, but are we back to that land bill of 2013?
I think the issue is very simple. As far as the central government is concerned, it is certainly a clamp down, and the cost or the purposes of acquisition of land, especially for the national highways, Mr. Gadkari is going to find it little more time consuming before these lands can be acquired and the rollout in terms of new roads can be actually rolled out. I don't think there's an issue on the compensation because the government had definitely agreed to the compensation, so there's no variance between what the old bill and the new bill is done. But the period and time and methodology used for the purposes of acquisition are going to be more dilatory and time consuming, and hence the Central Act is going to be a problem. But I believe that the states will now be asked to independently pass the bills at the state level for the land acquisition bills or the land acquisition to be done for their properties, and will not come under the Centre Act. This is only limited to the acquisitions by the central government.
Fair point indeed. But Mr. Hiranandani, how disappointed are you that the 8 amendments that were a part of the ordinance, which was actually considered diluting the 2013 Act, but would have made it easier for people like yourselves to acquire land, have all been left out? That's a rather populist move. That's a move that almost seems to suggest that politics is still calling the shots here in New Delhi. How disappointed are you with that move?
I don't see that as a major issue because I think the states will definitely pass their own bills as far as that is concerned, and none of the private acquisitions will take place as far as this. I think the states are going to come into competition for the purposes of acquisition of lands, and probably the amendments will take place at the state level because the states also, in order to make in India, will require to be acquired. As far as private persons are concerned, people and companies and corporates like us, we don't go under the land acquisition bill at all. So I don't think any further acquisition in terms of land or other things will go through the land acquisition route. It will probably be more in respect of infrastructure that is going to become important. So the states will have to make amendments to take place at the state level. Otherwise, they are going to be left out in terms of those states who don't have adequate land for the Make in India story. Also at the state level, they need to acquire lots of land. For instance, the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor is concerned, or the Navi Mumbai Airport is concerned, or similar areas of acquisition which the states require to be done for their manufacturing or Make in India. I think the states will, very soon formulate their own laws where the compensation will be similar to what the central government is doing, but the processes will be simplified and made easy for the purposes of faster acquisition.
Mr. Hiranandani, I have 2 questions to ask of you. One, of course, is on the possible litigation, but I'm going to come to that in just a bit. But the fact that land is the starting point of any investment, from a sentiment point of view, and because this has been a climb down of sorts by the Modi government, from a sentiment point of view, this is enhanced, liberalized compensation, all of that very well said. But from a sentiment point of view, does this give you a sense that the government is not bold enough to take the bull by its horns and it has bowed under political pressure?
I think we are all confused at the corporate level why the central government did not have a joint sitting of parliament in order to get this bill passed, because we all expected that the government, for political or otherwise other reasons, would have called a joint sitting of parliament where they would have a majority. But we are not very clear as to what the politics of this move are in terms of not requiring it to be passed, because both from a political point of view as well as the economics of India, I think if they had passed the bill, it would have been in the interest of development of India, not necessarily corporate India alone. So I think we are confused as to why the central government is not doing this. Certainly, definitely a climb down. But I think in the long run, maybe they wanted some consensus to be done in Parliament, and that is why they have taken this decision, a purely political decision. I don't think it's only the issue of Parliament and the whole thing, because they could have done a joint session of Parliament is what I believe the law says, or that is my understanding of the law.
Mr. Hiranandani, if I get you right, what you're saying is that the competitive federalism will ensure that the right policy gets done eventually at the state level, and that you have more industry-friendly land policies between, say, Gujarat and and a Tamil Nadu and say another state like Bengal, which is vying for corporate investments. Do you think that's the only way out? Because at the central level, clearly, we're not going to have an enabling policy framework as far as land is concerned.
In some respects, some of the states were finding that even the amendments which were proposed by the Central Act were not adequate enough or fast enough in order to complete the acquisition processes. Nobody, I repeat, nobody is talking about compensation being less or more. Everybody was happy to give the higher compensation to the farmers. But everybody is in not able to understand why speedier processes for land acquisition cannot be a norm. And I think the states will compete. It's not only compete, but they will have to produce results, because otherwise most of the corporates can move very fast outside the states, and also investment coming into the states. There's a huge amount of competition among states to draw investments into their states.
Right. Let you have the last word, Mr. Hiranandani, which is on the signal that this is sending to corporate India. This was seen as a government with a strong mandate, 282 seats in the Lok Sabha, a lot of expectations on bold, tough reforms. People were hoping that they'd move on labour reforms as well. Does this kind of send a signal that it's not going to be easy to push through these politically contentious reforms?
Corporate India doesn't believe that really the government cannot do it. I think there appears to be some issues which we are not able to understand as to why the central government cannot do it. I think being a party in majority and having a combined strength in both of the parliament and the lower and upper house, there is no good reason that we can understand why parliament really cannot pass these bills which are required. Of course, the issues like GST will require a larger percentage and hence will require cooperation of both sides. So maybe it's a kind of a compromise in order to get GST passed by the Congress party to join hands in this issue. So there could be a political intent which may be larger than what we are able to see just now.
Right. Mr. Hiranandani, just for the benefit of our viewers who've probably just tuned in, I just want to recap the story that as we're breaking right here on ET Now, and I want your comments again in just a few seconds, but just to recap this big story that's breaking right now on ET Now, which is that the government seems to have done a complete climb down on the land bill like we'd reported a few weeks ago. And I remember Mr. Hiranandani commented that day as well, calling it a bit of a disappointment, but they seem to have done a complete climb down, and they've now issued a new order, which is a new statutory order, which is a complete clampdown. They've said that benefits of compensation rehab will be extended to 13 central acts. I want to get those flashes back on the screen as well for the benefit of our viewers who've just tuning in. They've ensured that the statutory order gives powers to remove difficulties in land wills. This is an attempt by the government to be seen as pro-poor. The order is to ensure compensation for land acquired under 13 of those acts and to essentially safeguard rehabilitation of landowners. That's the key intent, to safeguard rehabilitation of landowners. 8 of the amendments that were originally proposed in the Land Ordinance that was issued by this government after coming to power have been dropped. That's the other big headline here, that 8 amendments have been dropped by this government. So 8 amendments included in the Land Ordinance have been left out. So this definitely comes as a bit of a setback for corporate India that was hoping that this government would move on this contentious land bill. So perhaps just tossing to you if you've got any more information from government sources on the reason and the rationale behind such a climb down.
So they're essentially saying that they did not want to go ahead and be seen as anti-farmer, and which is why they have decided the idea really is to get the norms of liberalized and enhanced compensation extended to the 13 central acts that, of course, we've spoken about, which is the Highways Act, which is the Coal Bearing Act, and all of this. So under this new regime and under this new